Hi, my name is Travis Austin,
And this is Nathan Kurtz.
and we work in the New Boundary Technologies Support Department. Today, we're going to show you a technical overview on how to install the Prism Deploy client. Nate?
So the first thing to do would be to launch the Prism Deploy console. And while we wait for this to launch, we can briefly talk about the two different options for installing the client. We have an option to push the client over the network, as well as to generate a subscription file that we can run on machines to install the client. But let's talk about pushing the client over the network first. So within the console, if we move to the Network tab, you will note that we have done a rudimentary network discovery to find machines in your environment that you can install the client to. So let us take a machine and remotely install the client to it. One thing to note would be that from the machine that you are running the Prism Deploy console, you would need to be logged into it as a user that has administrator credentials over that machine so that you have the ability to install the client.
Nate, what if I can't be logged in as an administrative user over the client machine in question?
In that situation, we have the ability for you to use alternate network credentials for the installation that you can then specify the domain, the username, and password to use for the installation of the client. But in this case, I am logged into this machine as a domain administrator, so I do have permissions to install the client. One other thing to note is that using the network push, it also requires that the machine be rebooted before the client is successfully installed. So let's install the client on this machine. So we can note that the install here succeeded, but the machine needs to reboot. So while the machine reboots, let's talk about the second option, using a subscription file. So if we come to the Computer's File menu option and create a subscription file to install or update the client, and then save this somewhere, we now have an executable that we can run on a client machine to install the client. The first hurdle that you might run into would be to how to go about actually installing the client using the subscription file on your machines. And while the simplest method might be using a sneaker net, running around to each machine and installing the client on it individually, a more advanced but easier solution might be to use an Active Directory GPO. And that is indeed the way that we would recommend installing the client.
Nate, does the subscription file method require that the machine be rebooted like the direct push does?
Using a subscription file does not require a reboot like the direct push method does. If we now go back to the Manage tab, we should now see that the client was installed from our network push, and it indeed is.
Great. Thanks, Nate. Our next video, we're going to discuss